J-Raff Show, giving you weekly sports analysis, opinions, and discussion. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and J-Raff.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 158th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays. Alongside of me, Elf, Justin Raffoff.
Yeah. You caught me off guard. I was not ready for that. All right. Yeah, it's good to be back. You know, kind of plenty of things to talk about, you know, like spring training baseball and hockey season and basketball and all that good stuff, right?
No, we're going to just talk
football. I know, we have to do it.
I thought you like football, right?
No, not anymore.
Not right now.
I've changed my mind.
But Penn State's in a bowl game.
You know what? College football, let's do a whole show.
It means something this year, right?
Let's do a whole show on why I am all for as many bowl games as possible.
Sure, why not?
If you hate bowl games, you hate America.
True that. So, anyways, welcome back here for another unconventional episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. You know, again, for the entire month of December, we're not doing Sunday shows just because it's the holidays and there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. We're both very busy, so we're happy we're able to do a show here right before Christmas and before the New Year's and really before all the bowls kick off. But I don't think we'll be talking any college football this evening. We want to talk majority of the little bit of airtime that we have this evening to talk about NFL Week 16 and the upcoming NFL Week 17 because it's still it was a big week this past week and it's a big week this coming week for a handful of teams that are still trying to either clinch a playoff spot, win the division, or even try to find a playoff bye. So there are a couple of scenarios out there, and we're going to try to cover a bunch of them. But before we do that, we do want to remind you fine folks out there that this is an interactive show. There's multiple ways you can contact us, and Justin has that information for you.
Yeah, we'd love to have your take on any of the things, especially with, you know, a little bit of the gaps between the shows this month. We'd love to have your take on any of the teams or playoff situations or anything like that we'll get to. You can use the Mays Sandwich Shop hotline to call the show. That number is 530-563-6297. Again, 530-563-6297. You can also use the Mays Sandwich Shop inbox, and that you can email the show anytime at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. Again, joemaysandjraff@gmail.com.
Besides the hotline and the Mays Sandwich Shop email inbox, we also have a social media presence primarily through Facebook and Twitter. You can like our fan page on Facebook as well as follow us on Twitter. We're at Joe Mays and J-Raff. We have both of those up during the show, and we'd love to hear your take you know, on the NFL games this past weekend. If you have a suggestion for us, if you have a question for us, a comment, whatever, definitely hit us up in any way, any fashion that you want to do so. But we'd love to take your call, read your email, whatever it may be. It's a lot more fun to do this when there's other people talking rather than just Justin and I, because, you know, as much as we like to hear ourselves talk, I'm not sure everyone agrees with us.
Well, we like to point out how wrong some of our callers are.
Right. Well, you know, and that does happen a lot.
However, I don't know if it's coming tonight, but I know at some point I'm going to get maybe not a call. It might be a face-to-face meeting about
maybe you don't want
how
to call
wrong
tonight.
some of things
I don't know.
Yeah, I should have slipped in a wrong number there. But you know what? No, in all honesty, we'll get there. We'll talk about you know, that giant elephant in the room at some point, and you know we have to. It needs to be talked about. So yeah, we'll get there at some point.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. We're probably gonna do that last. So we're gonna run through a bunch of the other NFL games from week 16. We'll start with the first one that was played, and that was this incredible matchup on Thursday night. This late in the season, you just don't usually see these games, and when you have two teams that have won 2 games.
It makes me think. I guess every team had to play a Thursday night game this year.
Is that the requirement?
I think it was, because I was thinking, I'm like, why? Why would they?
Why? Just why? You don't have to embellish or
but
extend
I think every team played a Thursday game this year.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's 100% true, but I believe it is when I think about the games we've seen on Thursday nights. So you needed the Titans-Jaguars matchup at some point. Jaguars got off to a really slow start, but then, you know, the defense played pretty well. You're going against Titans, so it's hard to say how well the defense actually played, but one of the cool things at the end, I'm sure you saw it, I don't even know who the guy was for the Jaguars, but he got a sack on the last play to
Was
end
it
the
Senderic
game.
Marks?
I think it was. And because of that, he
got, like,
got
a
this
huge bonus.
$600,000 escalator bonus in his contract. So, good for him. And you say, like, you talk about how, players don't keep track of their stats, their games were over.
Oh, yeah, they do.
No, he sacked him, and everyone on the team
Was
celebrated
like
crazy.
yeah.
Not because they just won their third game of the season, but because he just got $600,000.
Right.
And, I'd be happy for him, too.
Yeah,
Heck
good for him.
That's awesome. So, I was interested in this game only because I picked the Jaguars. So
I did too. Winner.
I turned it off early in the game because I was bored, and I was like, yeah, I don't see this going well for the Jaguars. So I was like, you know what, I'll just look it up later when I wake up. And to my surprise, I woke up to see the Jaguars had won.
Yes. 21-13, the Jaguars beat the Titans to improve to 3-12. The Titans dropped to 2-13. They are firmly in the second spot in the NFL draft order, which that topic will be coming up a lot more as the weeks progress here and the playoffs get started. And then when Super Bowl is over, we'll definitely be talking NFL draft. Okay, then we had 2 Saturday games. We'll touch on the late one first. We'll probably save that other Saturday one for the last.
Both are very interesting in terms of the results and the ramifications.
Yes, and the late game featured the two of the California teams, the Chargers from the AFC, fighting for a playoff spot. 49ers knew they were out of it, but they didn't play like that in the first half.
No.
They were up 28-7 on the Chargers at halftime. It's at home. It's in the new Levi Stadium. The 49ers are thinking that this maybe was a season that got away from them. They had a lot of injuries. They had a lot of off-the-field drama to work through. But you know that there's potential and talent there, and was on display in the first half against the Chargers.
That first half, you're like, man, this is the team that we saw the last 3 years that made it to championship games. And you're like, oh man, they were off at the beginning of the season, and turmoil between the front office and the coaching staff, and off the field issues with some of the players, and all kinds of stuff going on. Maybe that just derailed their season, and then the second half reminded us of this year's 49ers. Actually, the second half reminded us of like this year's Titans, maybe.
They got 7 points
bad.
To the Chargers 31. So the Chargers put up 31 points in the second half in overtime. They kicked the game-winning field goal in overtime to win 38-35 to keep the Chargers' playoff hopes alive. And I know knock a few AFC teams out of contention with that comeback win. I think one of them actually might have been my Dolphins, even though Miami has the tiebreaker with San Diego. Because of the other tiebreakers, when a bunch of teams tie, the head-to-head gets thrown out. So I think they essentially knocked Miami out of contention with that comeback win of theirs. But they're in position. I think if they win this week, they might be in. I'm not sure. Something else might have to happen.
I'm not 100% sure.
Let's see if I pull up some scenarios here.
Yeah, but so the Chargers, again, Phillip Rivers with a bulging disc in his back. They said they actually, the doctors and some of the people were trying to convince him to shut it down a couple weeks ago when it looked like the Chargers may have been too far out. And he's kept playing, and he put together a great comeback. I think, unfortunately, due to a couple issues. One, it was a late start on a Saturday night. 2, they were getting blown out early. 3, it was on the NFL Network. I'm not sure how many people actually saw the comeback. Now, because it was Saturday night and everybody heard about it all day Sunday, and they're still alive in the playoffs, it'll stick around. But if that were, the Monday night game, or if that were a bigger game, I think it would have been a bigger in the news cycle, I should say. However, like you mentioned, very meaningful to the Chargers, who are still alive in the AFC playoff picture. And again, we've seen it a couple years where the Chargers just never seem to be an easy out in the playoffs. They haven't necessarily put together that long playoff run, but they're never an easy out in the playoffs. So
the Chargers actually, sorry, finish.
No, I don't think a lot of teams would necessarily want to go against Phillip Rivers in the playoffs, and a physical team, and you have Antonio Gates and just some of those weapons. So it would be an interesting thing, to see if they could sneak in there.
The Chargers actually, I think, essentially clinch a playoff spot with a victory in Week 17. It looks like
no matter the Chiefs, I think.
No matter
Chiefs. I don't know.
No matter what happens in Broncos Bengals, it changes up a couple of the ones with tie scenarios. But no matter what happens tonight, Broncos Bengals game, if the Chargers win next week, they are in the playoffs. and they play at Kansas City at 1 o'clock.
Right. Kansas City, who I think was eliminated.
No, they're not eliminated yet.
Okay,
They probably need a ton of help besides winning, I'm sure. The Chiefs clinch a playoff spot with a win plus a Ravens loss and a Texans loss. So for the Chiefs to get in, they need Baltimore to lose and Houston to lose.
That's actually...
Plus winning.
That's not all that...
Does Baltimore play Cleveland?
Yeah, they do.
And they're on their third-string quarterback, and they're coming off of a really awful loss to Houston.
Right. So, I
don't see...
I don't see it happening.
I don't see...
I thought when we were going to read through this scenario, I thought it was going to be a more ridiculous scenario for Kansas City.
Oh, and Houston has Jacksonville.
Never mind. I take it back.
So, it looks almost like the Ravens have a pretty easy way to get in. They need Pittsburgh to beat Cincinnati and San Diego to lose to Kansas City. That's much more feasible than these other teams.
Oh, yeah.
The Chiefs and Texans have a very difficult task because the two teams they need to lose play basically pushovers.
Right.
So essentially it's going to come down to the AFC North. Steelers-Bengals game Sunday night is one of the biggest games of the year.
Yeah, because you very well could end up in a situation... Like, the Steelers are in the playoffs, right? They clinched a playoff spot with their win yesterday, I think. They just haven't clinched the division. So the Bengals could fall out of it if they lose tonight and lose on Sunday.
The Bengals clinch a spot if they beat the Broncos tonight.
Which would end it, because I believe the Steelers... Well, no, that wouldn't end it, because one of the Bengals or Steelers are going to get one of the division spots.
Right.
I'm not sure. It's really complicated. Tonight will help clear it up.
Once tonight's action is complete, then you know Week 17 is a lot easier. The Chiefs and Texans, it's clear cut. The game tonight means nothing. Next week, the Ravens and Texans must lose for the Chiefs to make it, and the Ravens and Chargers must lose for the Texans to make it. So
and I think the way it's set up, just to kind of go back to it, if the Bengals lose tonight, they play the Broncos. It could happen.
If the Broncos beat the Bengals, the Steelers win the North.
Right. And the Bengals would probably still need to win next week in order to get into the playoffs. Again, that tie is going to throw things into weird scenarios in terms of these playoff situations.
Right. See, if the Bengals lose tonight, Pittsburgh wins the AFC North. So then if Pittsburgh loses to Cincy next week, that eliminates Baltimore.
Wow.
So Pittsburgh could get rid of Baltimore by laying down to Cincinnati.
Which could put them in at possibly the 6th seed, meaning a rematch the next week. I don't know. But I don't know that. But just think about if you play them one week and you play them the next. That happened with Philly and Dallas a couple years ago, I think. Played back-to-back weeks.
There's a lot going on, but that Monday night game tonight is a huge one. So
right. Well, and Denver... is looking to keep that bye week. They've got something to play for.
If they beat the Bengals, they clinch a bye.
Right.
They're guaranteed no worse than number 2.
And the Bills, the Bills losing to Oakland yesterday.
That's killer.
A tough one.
That's killer.
Because they could have been playing for something against a New England team that had already clinched a bye.
Yep.
That would have been interesting. But anyway. To kind of go back to that Chargers game, the Chargers are still in the hunt in the AFC after the amazing comeback on Saturday night.
The Seahawks-Cardinals game last night was not very good. The Seahawks are now drawn even with the Cardinals at 11-4, but they now control their own destiny. If they beat, I believe, the Rams this week, they are division champs, and they can actually clinch home field advantage if the Cowboys lose this coming week, or the Lions-Packers game doesn't end in a tie.
Right.
So the Seahawks, wow, that's incredible for the Seahawks to come around like that.
Think about it, because about halfway through the season, people are talking about how they might miss out on the playoffs. Yet the Cardinals, down to their third-string quarterback, everybody kind of saw this coming. However, the Seahawks, man, the way they're rolling, and early in the season, people were talking about, is it going to be an issue when Russell Wilson's contract is up, which might be after this year, but I'm not 100% sure. It might be after next year, because he makes significantly less than other. And when I say top-level quarterbacks, I mean quarterbacks that are going to get you to Super Bowls and give you a chance to win Super Bowls, which he obviously is because they have won a Super Bowl. And their offense was sputtering a little bit, and now like he seems like that mix of he'll run when he needs to, or run to hurt you. He gets down or gets out of bounds almost every single time. You don't see Russell Wilson getting hit hard in the pocket or when he's on the run, which is amazing for a running quarterback.
Right.
And the defense, I mean, just unreal. They take their lumps, and they have this year with penalties. I saw the stat they showed last night. The Seahawks, on average, are getting penalized twice as much as their opponent like that week. That comes with the style of defense they play. However, that's also creating lots of big plays for their defense. And I just think in the NFC right now, they look really good. And that the Packers, I think the Packers can they still get the 1 seed?
Yeah, they clinched the North and a first-round bye with a win, and they get home field with a win and a Seahawks loss.
Right. And think about how huge that is for either one of those teams. Seahawks having to go to Lambeau, or the Packers having to go to Seattle. If it was a 1-2, I know when you look at the stats that actually rarely works out. So the top 2 seeds, I don't want to say rarely. It's not like it's an every year occurrence that the top 2 seeds are playing in the championship games, but that's a big deal. And when you look at it, the Seahawks beat the Packers on opening night pretty handedly.
Yeah.
So now both teams have come a long way since then. So we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But again, in the NFC, it's a little more clear on the playoff picture in terms of the teams. Seeding is not all settled in yet, though.
Right. I believe 5 of the 6 teams have clinched a spot. It's just who's gonna play where. It's incredible to me that Dallas at 12-4 basically can't clinch a home field advantage because they need a Cardinals loss and a tie in the Lions-Packers because they lose the tiebreaker to Detroit and Green Bay.
What hurts them is the 3-way tie.
Yeah.
Because if it would have been a 2-way tie with just them in Seattle, they get it, I think, because they beat Seattle head-to-head. But in a 3-way tie, like you said, some of those head-to-heads go out because not all 3 teams played each other.
And because none of them are in the same division. What it comes down to is Dallas, Seattle, and then the winner of the North. You already did all the division tiebreakers, so now you can't do head-to-head because there's a 3-way, so they throw that out. And then it comes to NFC record, and the other 2 teams have a better NFC record than Dallas. Right. So the Cowboys essentially, they'll get a home game. They're huge Rams fans, just like the Packers and Lions are. All these teams need the Seahawks to lose if they want to have better seeds, home field or first round bye.
And the way the Rams had been playing, I know we haven't gotten to them yet here, but the way the Rams had been playing versus how they played this week, I just don't know what to expect. Yeah. I thought that could be kind of a toss-up game, but we'll have to wait and see.
Let's finish running through some of these scores here. We touched on some of the scenarios for Week 17, but we mentioned the Seahawks manhandled the Cardinals 35-6. Arizona's actually going to start Logan Thomas, who's kind of their 4th-string quarterback.
And in reality, they've already played him for a little bit before he got hurt, so they've played 4 quarterbacks this year and are still going to the playoffs.
Arizona is limping. I don't expect much from them, honestly.
No.
Wherever they end up playing.
If the defense can play well enough in one game and they can run the ball, see, that's the problem. They can't run the ball either because they have injuries there too.
Right.
And they're going to have to go on the road now.
Absolutely.
So they're in trouble.
Buffalo went to Oakland and lost. We mentioned that the Bills are eliminated from the AFC playoffs scenario. The Raiders won 26-24. A lot of people are banging the drum for Tony Sparano to stay as the head coach.
It's not going to happen.
No, I don't think it's going to happen either. Cowboys destroyed the Colts.
Real quick, it may get Tony Sparano a job somewhere else quicker than he was the way things ended in Miami.
Dallas was up 28-0 in halftime, and they've never really took their foot off the pedal. I think it was 42-0 near the end of the 4th as well. So this was just absolute dominating performance. And I saw that some of the players, coaches, and staff were hyping up Romo for MVP talk. And a lot of people are quick to dismiss it, but I saw a note about QBR in the last 9 years, and Tony Romo has the 2nd highest in the last 9 seasons combined. I mean, think about some of the quarterback play we've seen the last 9 years from Rodgers, Manning, Brady, Breeze. Romo's second highest
ever. Right,
in these 9 seasons.
I understand it, and he played. Has been his best season. Like it's been unbelievable. And I don't know if his stats across the board line up to match that, but he has played his best season this year. However, I would I think the things that are going to hurt him in that category are many people are going to say the reason he had his best year is because they had like the best year a running back has had since.
Hey, a lot of that goes hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely. But I don't think a lot of people are necessarily going to see it that way. To some degree, he helps that.
Right, yeah. You can't cue on Murray if Romo's going to hurt you. You can't cue on Romo if Murray's going to hurt you. That's why, symbiotic relationship.
Right.
Best teams have it.
And I think that'll split some people, though, because I think DeMarco Murray may get a couple votes, and in the race this year, that may do it. Rodgers is probably going to get some. It wouldn't surprise me if even here's another key part. I don't know who votes for NFL MVP. Is it media? Is it select media? Okay. Well, do you think the Texas media in general is going to be split and J.J. Watt gets a couple votes?
Oh, yeah. It's the Penn State syndrome from 94.
Right.
So you vote for Collins, Carter.
Right. So I don't see him getting it. He's worthy to be in the discussion, though.
You mentioned the Rams.
His best year.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Rams, what team's going to show up. They had been playing well recently, but they hosted the Giants, who have been a better road team under Coughlin and Manning. And the Giants came out with the victory. They both are at 6-9 now. Neither of them going anywhere. Interesting to see what happens the offseason with both teams, as they both kind of have questions at quarterback for sure. The Rams with Bradford, who missed now basically 2 full years, and the Giants, what's going to happen with Coughlin and Manning. So that's Giants-Rams, 37-27 New York.
Yeah, and again, in this, and this is something I want to talk to you about sometime, not necessarily even on the show, but I feel like I've seen more like on the field / sideline like skirmishes, like all-out brawls with people punching this year than I've seen in collectively all the years I can remember really watching football. It happened in this game, and for once they ejected like 4 or 5 players, and
that's what you need to start doing.
Right. I mean, most of the time they haven't been ejecting anyone, and I think that kind of leads to some of it. You want to get their attention, suspend them for next week, and take a game check. I know it's not that simple, and other issues, and I'm not blaming players when there's a thing like I understand if you go and you're gonna have the back of your guy. I'm just saying like. I think for all the image things that they try and worry about, and the things like celebration, when celebration's a 15-yard penalty and you have these skirmishes happening seemingly on a weekly basis in multiple games now, I think that's something that I think it will be addressed and is cleaned up pretty soon.
You would expect that to happen. Right. We're going to jump around here a bit just to throw out a few games before we talk about a couple near the end here. The Texans kept their playoff hopes alive by beating the Ravens. They had to win that game. They did it. Baltimore couldn't get anything done. I know the offense is taking a lot of heat today.
A 12-point game, and it was not that close.
No, Houston.
J.J. Watt.
Again, a man-child.
Just seeing him, and he had this stereotypical football look because he had a bloody nose, the blood's pouring down his face, and he's out and just like going out there, just wrecking people, play after play after play. It's just unreal, and he's so much fun to watch. So much fun to watch because he's a guy who single-handedly, as a defensive lineman, changes games. You know what it reminds me of? In Ndamukong Suh, towards the end at Nebraska, how they were putting like 2 or 3 guys on him, and he was just throwing them off, running through the line, and wrecking plays. Fun to watch.
The Battle of the Bays is green this year as the Packers went down to Tampa and took out the hapless Buccaneers 20-3. Green Bay clinched the playoff spot, put them in a showdown with Detroit, who was able to handle Jimmy Clausen and the Bears. They survived that one in Chicago 20-14,
by the way,
setting up a huge Week 17
Jay
game.
Cutler starting Week 17 because Clausen's out with
concussion.
A concussion.
The Steelers are on a roll. They're 7-2 in their last 9. Their 2 losses probably not great. Both were by 7 points or less, but 6 of their 7 wins are against playoff teams or teams still in the playoff hunt. So they've had good victories.
Usually
they're doing it in the North.
Usually you see the opposite, where a team, all their wins come against bad teams and they don't beat good teams. Eagles. Anyway.
We'll get to that.
However, the Steelers have been losing to bad teams and beating good teams.
They lost by a touchdown to the Jets, lost by 3 to the Saints. Neither of them are going to the playoffs.
Lost to Tampa Bay.
The only team that they beat that's no good is Tennessee. Their 6 other wins in this streak in the last 9 have all been against teams that are good, challenging for playoff spots.
And depending on the outcome tonight, have a chance to clinch. They have a chance to
they
clinch
can clinch
while
the
they're
division
sitting on
tonight,
their couch.
right?
So
in a game that you thought would mean nothing, but ends up still mattering because of what else happened in the NFC South. The Panthers squeaked by the Browns 17-13. Manziel, terrible. Cam Newton looked okay. He had a rushing touchdown. So they get a win, setting down another end-of-the-year game that decides the winner. The winner will have 7 wins. It happened a few years ago with the Seahawks, but the winner of this week's Panthers-Falcons game will be the NFC South representative at 7-9.
Yeah, so again, I don't think the Panthers really scare me. I mean, they may beat the Falcons next week, but I don't think they really scare me if I'm a playoff team. The Falcons,
if that offense gets clicking,
and remember that wildcard team is going into Atlanta. So just think about this for a second. I'm not saying it will happen, but there's a chance that could be the Packers. The Packers, if they lose to Detroit, I believe Detroit would win the division. Packers then become the 5 seed, going to the 4 seed, who, I think the Packers rout them if they play. But they just played a close game. Now it was a blowout and the Falcons came back. But you're going to Atlanta in the Dome with Matt Ryan, who can throw it all over the place. It's crazy. And I don't think they should change the rule. I like the rule.
If I'm an NFC team, I want the Panthers to win because I think I'm more confident beating Carolina in Carolina than I am beating Atlanta in Atlanta.
Heck yeah.
So, obviously, that means Atlanta beat the Saints, who they can't win at home.
They are terrible.
They're not scoring points. Their defense is off. The Saints are a huge miss for us this year. I think for everyone, though.
And we'll talk more about this when we get to draft needs and things like that. The Saints are a team that went from a lot to a little very fast. They got old and people moved on real quick, and I think they're missing people, and it's bad. It's bad. So I don't know exactly what the answer is there either. That's kind of a crazy thing. So
the Patriots sweep by the Jets 17-16. I believe they locked up no worse than the number 2 seed in the AFC playoffs. They're looking for the home field advantage, which they'll get, I believe, with a win this week against Buffalo, since they hold the tiebreaker with Denver and Indianapolis.
It'll be interesting. I was really excited to see Buffalo play them in a meaningful game at the end, but not so much for Buffalo. It's still meaningful, and Buffalo has played some good teams well the last few weeks. They lost to Denver by 7. They beat the Packers. They were kind of gaining momentum, and then they kind of laid an egg against a team in Oakland that's gaining some steam and isn't the pushover they were in the first half of the year. But that's a game you gotta win.
Yeah, absolutely. Buffalo. All right, so last 2 games featuring our teams. Minnesota went to Miami. Entering the fourth quarter, Miami was down a field goal. It was 17-14.
And an ugly game.
The fourth quarter, there were 41 points scored in the fourth quarter, including 9 in the final minute 14, all by the Dolphins.
Including the game-winning safety.
Block punt out of the end zone.
It looked like a basketball rejection. It landed like 5th row.
It was, yeah. And after seeing a block punt return for a touchdown against them last week at Gillette, I'm happy that them returning the favor to the opposing team and winning the game because of it. Miami scored the tying touchdown with like a minute 14 to play. And then the defense held, they forced the punt, they blocked the punt, and they win the game. Now, because of other things that happened, it was meaningless.
I didn't realize that at the time either. And not so much that I thought, they're going to get in, because I figured, the last 2 weeks, like
they had to beat Baltimore
or New England. And looking back at it, that Baltimore game is going to really come back.
Well, the ones that haunt me is the Green Bay game, the Detroit game, the Denver game. All games they led in the fourth quarter.
Absolutely, those are the ones.
Distance.
And that happens too. And so, we'll be back to those games that haunt you kind of moment in that theme in a second. But either way, it was good for the Dolphins. I don't know who did they play this last week.
The Jets.
The Jets. So let's say they beat the Jets. I don't know. The tough part there is you might get the emotional Jets surge. For for Rex Ryan, who they know is out. But if they can manage a win there, you went 9-7. That might save Joe Philbin's job.
They already said. Stephen Ross already said he'll be back.
Good, because I feel like they're moving in the right direction.
It's just
Here's the
last
thing,
year
is-
they're 8-6. They need to win one of their final two. They lose both. This year they're 8-5. They need to win 3 of their last 4, but 2 of them you figure they could win next week against the Jets, the Vikings this week. Then you need to just beat Baltimore or New England. You're up by 10 on Baltimore, you lose. You're a better team in the first half against New England, and you get destroyed.
And that's exactly it. We're talking about themes here between our teams, and there's another one that's going to come up. You had winnable games that you needed to win,
and you
didn't
get it done.
do it. You know, and that's just what it comes down to. And so kind of as we move on, right? So the Dolphins, good win for them.
Ultimately meaningless.
Because of the win and because, the way it's building, that may have been, it might not have been next week's game. It might have been this last game. Excuse me. That saved Philbin's job. Or at least saved the discussion. Because Ross is the guy who's out there. He'll go out and get whoever it is. So it's just interesting to kind of see how that plays out and how both those teams will play next week.
All right, the last game was actually the first game on Saturday. Featured the NFC East showdown between the Eagles and Redskins. Redskins 3-11, playing for nothing. The Eagles 9-5, knowing they need a win to keep their playoff hopes
having
alive.
everything to play for.
They, just a month ago, Philadelphia was coming off a huge win, dominating performance in Dallas on Thanksgiving. They are 9-3. Now the next week, tough game. You got to play Seattle. It's at home though. I think you showed that they weren't quite ready. They're not quite there.
Absolutely.
But you were able to the next week show that you can compete with some of the better teams. You may not be that elite that Seattle was last year and is steamrolling to now, but you had to play a team that just 2 weeks ago you handily beat. And they came out and punched you in the mouth at the beginning of the game, and you didn't help your cause. Right. Now, you didn't give up. You stormed back, but you couldn't finish it.
Right. And
then this week,
same thing happened this week. You find yourself, you play even early on. You find yourself down, and then they came back.
No, they were winning at halftime.
Right.
I mean, it was only by 4.
Right.
But you're winning at halftime in a game you have to win.
Right. And going in, again, I didn't really like the thing, but they should have gotten a field goal before halftime. They ended up not getting the field goal before halftime. And then they come out, and Washington literally hands them the ball. Like, the guy just drops it on the kickoff return to start the second half. And the Eagles miss a short field goal. So now they're 0 for 2 on field goals. In a game they end up losing by 3.
Bad game for Cody Park to have his worst game
bad time
of the
to have
year.
your worst game. He'd only missed 2 all year coming into the game.
He missed 2 in the game.
2, and one was a 34-yarder.
Right, which you don't miss.
No. But again, it's not just that. It's lots of little things. Boykin needs to be in the game. Like, I know we've talked about it. I know he doesn't have the physical traits, but he has the physical traits to go out there and compete. Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Right.
2 weeks ago, what's the worst thing that could happen? Des Bryant burns him 3 times?
You're telling me that despite his stature, maybe a bit undersized, maybe not as strong, but he has better technique and fundamentals than Bradley Fletcher and Kerry Williams. You're not going to give him a chance to cover Des Bryant? A chance to cover Deshaun Jackson?
Who's not big.
Right.
Deshaun Jackson is not big.
I don't know. I mean, it's something that I've been, I understand you got to play the odds, but there's always people that are able to break those molds. I mean, you talk about quarterbacks, Drew Brees and Russell Wilson. Now, I know Brees not so great this year, but he's won a Super Bowl. He was arguably the best quarterback in the league for a couple seasons. You got to give these guys a chance. There's always going to be someone that's the exception to the rule, and maybe Boykin could be that. But they continue to play him in a nickel dime roll or in the slot, not matching up against the big guys.
Right, and this is the week where, at least to the Philly media, that has been fully brought into question. It had been a little bit before, especially after the Des Bryant getting 3 touchdowns against them 2 weeks ago. But let me be honest. I had said all along, and I'm not sure it'll actually work out that way, but I was convinced that if the Eagles got to 11-5, that they would make the playoffs. Meaning that even if they lost to Seattle, and they lost to the Cowboys again.
You beat the Redskins, you beat the Giants.
Beat the Redskins, beat the Giants. Things would work out and they'd end up in. I'm not sure it would have been the case. You can't beat the Redskins, who are terrible. You don't deserve to get in. So while going into yesterday's games, I said it. Obviously, I was hoping they would get in. Like, I'm not rooting against my team. But at the same time, they don't deserve it. They don't deserve it at all. And you want to talk about good, going into this game, the Eagles hadn't lost to a team that was below 500. Now, they can't say that anymore. But they had only won 35% of their games against teams with 500 or better.
Right. That was one of the points I wanted to make. And I threw this out on the Draft Tech Power Rankings. I do the Steelers, Eagles, and Dolphins. And I talked a little bit about the Steelers research that I did in the last 9 games. They're 7-2 with 6 of those 7 wins against good teams in the playoffs or challenging for the playoffs. The Eagles have 9 wins on the season. 2 are against teams in the playoffs or challenging for the playoffs.
Well, you look at...
And one of them was in week 2.
Right, against the Colts. And looking back, they shouldn't have won that game.
Right. So they only beat Dallas in Dallas on Thanksgiving. All their other wins, there's 7 other wins, not counting the Colts, were against bottom feeders. They lost to all the good teams they played, save for the Redskins, who not good based on their record. But, you lose to the Seahawks, you lose to the 49ers, you lose to the Cowboys, you lose to the Cardinals.
Right.
Who else did they lose to? There was another one in there besides the Redskins. They lost another one. Oh, Green Bay.
Right.
Like, you showed you couldn't compete with who was going to be in the playoffs. So is it better to get a little bit better draft pick and miss the playoffs, or go to the playoffs and lose in the first round?
Right.
'Cause I don't think the way they've been playing, if they were going to make it in, say they beat the Redskins in a close game and they beat the Giants and they're the 6th seed, are they going to beat the 3 seed?
If the 3 seed is Dallas, it's a toss-up.
Right.
But... I completely agree.
And I know it's hard to say if
the thing is, as the fan, yes, I want them to make it. Even if it means you pick 5 or 6 spots later, I'm okay because you make it. However, they didn't deserve it. The way they played, they're idiots. Those people are idiots.
That kind of talk pisses me off because we're only in year 2. They weren't supposed to be good last year. They should prize everyone. People had expectations this year,
but still end up with 10 wins.
Right, still at 10 wins. I know it's not a division title. It's not playoffs, but
if they get 10 wins next year, most likely they're in the playoffs.
And you don't like to use the injury excuse, but you're not using who's supposed to be your starting quarterback.
Right.
You lost maybe not the best player on your defense, but the leader of a defense.
And a couple of the big losses that they had early in the season were when they had no one on the offensive line. They had like one starter. I think Jason Peters at one point for a couple big games was the only projected starter that was actually playing.
Right.
Now, some of that was brought on by themselves through
Johnson.
suspensions, but he ended up being terrible this year. Down the stretch, anyway. But they need so much help on defense that's what they actually need to kind of get done here. And you know what? I still think they're building. I don't think they found their long-term answer at quarterback. I think they found a couple things that aren't their answer at quarterback. I think they know Mark Sanchez isn't their long-term answer. I think they know that Nick Foles isn't the long-term answer, but is a better option than Mark Sanchez. So I think going into next year, I still think Nick Foles is going to be the quarterback. And that's okay. Because if they improve in the other areas, I think they're going to be good enough that Nick Foles is good enough to win you a lot of games. I'm not saying they're a Super Bowl contender, but I think they'll continue to improve and they'll get some of those other pieces in there. Again, you look at games that haunt you. Arizona, they had a chance to win and didn't. San Francisco had a chance to win and didn't. Came all the way back against Dallas. Couldn't finish the job.
Nope.
Came all the way back against Washington. Couldn't finish. They were driving for the winning field goal. They were driving for the winning field goal. Mark Sanchez throws an interception. The game over.
I'm not going to get into the Sanchez stuff because that would take another episode. But yeah, I mean, it really
I think
is.
He's played well enough to be a backup again somewhere next year.
But that's the thing. That's coming into the league. That's pretty much what I expected.
Right.
So
Pete Carroll nailed it. Like a lot of people want to give him crap because we always see how these college coaches kind of like we think they hype up their guys, but they don't necessarily do that.
They know the truth.
When we look at it, Jimbo Fisher, I think it was that basically told the Bills exactly what he thought
of E.J. Manuel.
E.J. Manuel, and they
look at him
drafted
now.
him anyway. Pete Carroll was I say brutally honest.
He needs another
said
year
Sanchez,
at USC.
You need another year at USC. Who knows where that puts him? You know, Barkley got the extra year at USC, and it didn't really work out for him either. It probably, I don't want to say it hurt him. It hurt him financially because he would have been a first-round pick.
Right.
He wasn't, but I'm not sure he would have been any worse. You know, like I don't know where he would be in terms of the pros. Like, but
yeah.
So. Anyway, I have to give it to the Cowboys. It kills me to say it, but like they've earned it this year. The Eagles did not. So all I need to do now is...
They won some big games. That's the difference.
I'm rooting for whoever that wild card team is to beat them in the first round. I hope Tony Romo fumbles the snap again.
It could be one of the. It'll be one of the NFC North teams, or I guess Arizona probably.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that goes. But I'm kind of hoping Detroit gets
I was gonna say you're probably hoping it's one of the NFC North teams because whoever gets Arizona, I think that's. I know they have a good defense.
They could end up having to do Seattle, or not Seattle. They could end up having to do Detroit at home in Dallas, then going to Green Bay, and then having to play at Seattle the next week.
If they win that home game, though, they're undefeated on the road.
No, absolutely, including a win in Seattle. Right,
which unheard of for the most part.
Right. So. Basically, I sent a text to someone. It's come down to there's only really 3 teams that I don't want to win it, but that pretty much guarantees 2 of them will make the Super Bowl. So,
I did get a text. Do you want me to read it?
You can.
Right. It's from my dad,
right.
And he says that I told him we're on the air. He's finishing up at work, but he says, "How about them Cowboys?"
Well, I figure it. You know, long-term statistics usually work. So I figure next year. Cowboys will be well under 500, and everything will be right with the world again.
I think
that's my hope.
To their fans, the people that have stuck through this and don't come back and forth, jump around, like making the NFC Championship game would be huge.
Right, and to be honest, we talk a lot of trash with your dad because the Cowboys and the Eagles are rivals. However, your dad is the kind of Cowboys fan who I can deal with. You know why? Because he's been a Cowboys.
They're going to be awful this year.
He's been a Cowboys fan every year.
Right.
You know, and I hear it from him every year.
Yeah.
Or he hears it from me every year.
Even if the Cowboys would go 2-14, if those wins are against the Eagles, that's
mildly
their
successful
season.
season.
Right, it was a good season.
So I can take it from him. It's the kids who are like, they don't watch the game, but they don't like the Eagles. No,
get out of my face.
Time of day.
Yeah, I understand.
That's not just for the Cowboys. That's anyone.
Yeah, I completely understand. I know exactly where you're coming from.
So anyway, I am really excited to see how these playoff pictures are going to develop. We'll have to wait and see kind of how the rooting interests develop. Obviously, I'd love Peyton Manning to get it, and with the Eagles out of it, that makes it super easy to kind of root for him. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I'm still that would be nice to see for my opinion anyway.
Yeah, in the AFC. My I have family from Pittsburgh. I wouldn't mind seeing if the Bengals sneak in. Seeing them make some noise. Broncos because of Manning.
The Bengals, I want them to win a few games in the playoffs or none, just to kind of see what's going to happen.
Right.
If they're going to win one game, then I'm like, If they win no games though, then you have the whole do you have
Dude, it's Dalton. Yeah,
people get fired.
I wouldn't mind the Chargers in the AFC.
No, Philip Rivers. I want them to lose.
In the NFC,
that's terrible. But
I don't want a repeat, so I don't want Seattle. I don't want
Seattle, but I'm careful because it'll depend on who my other options are.
I'd take Arizona, but I think that's a long shot.
I can live with Arizona because you know how many Cardinals fans I know? I don't know of a single one.
I'd take Green Bay. They don't bother me enough.
I understand.
It
is Green Bay.
The NFC South team, Carolina, Atlanta making a run. I'd be okay with that.
That would be awesome. Actually, I don't want Atlanta to win it because I don't like Matt Ryan.
You know what I want?
I want Carolina to get it done.
Carolina and Atlanta to tie. So Carolina has 2 ties.
And they would get
6-8-2, and they get in.
Oh my god.
But then they go to the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. That's what I want.
So we're set. Broncos, Panthers.
They're 9-6-1 going into or whatever it is.
They'd be 9-8-2.
Yeah, 9-8-2 going
Imagine
into
a team
the Super Bowl.
with 2 ties. When was the last time a team in the NFL had 2 ties?
A team that, if they don't win the Super Bowl, ends up back at 500.
Oh God. So, all right. Well,
Okay.
I think that's it for us here. This is our last show for 2014. So Merry Christmas to everyone. enjoy the last 9 days of the 2014. We'll see you again in 2015. Our next show is Sunday, January 4th.
Yeah, 2015. That scares me because 2015 means I will have been out of high school 13 years. That's as long as I was in kindergarten too. Senior year.
Yeah,
it would be funny if it was like longer.
You did as much. Yeah,
if it was like 15 years.
As much schooling as you got. Now you've been out as long. Yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, so we'll be back Sunday, January 4th, 2015. Any shout outs for you?
Not off the top of my head.
I mentioned it last time. I mentioned it again. My happy birthday to my dad. He turned 60 last Friday.
And to you.
I did not turn 60 though.
Wow. That's true. That'd be weird.
60 and 60, yeah, that'd be interesting. No, but thank you.
60 and 60, that sounds like the ESPN special in like 25 years.
So I think that's it. That wraps up the 158th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
We hope you tune in every Sunday evening at 6:30 for our Take Old Sports. Until next time, I'm J-Raff.
And I'm Joe Mays. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Don't forget, you can download each episode of the show from the podcast section of the iTunes Store. We'll see you next time, and thanks again for listening.